Welcome to Pure Hustle Podcast. I'm Mike.
And this is Orlando. We're on episode 433, and this one's a themed episode with some hustles of the week.
That's right. So on our themed episodes, we kind of talk about a specific concept in reselling or maybe a tip or strategy. And then we also have our update episodes, which are every other week. And those kind of go into more of current events in reselling, what we're doing reselling wise. And then we also have our live episodes that drop on YouTube. So please make sure to go on over to YouTube so that you don't miss our lives. But today we're talking about one of those things. I mean, when we're talking about reselling, what we're really talking about here, Orlando, is we're talking about making money, right? Like we're talking about putting dollars in the bank account. And one of the key factors, because we talk about different factors in reselling, you got your time, you got energy, you got location, you got how much space you have. But one of the key things is that cost. And so today we're going to be talking about how cost means everything in reselling, some tips and strategies on how to look at cost and ensure that you are maximizing the amount that you're taking home when at the end of the day and minimizing how much you're spending on items.
No, agreed. And we've talked about this so many times, but this is the reality of any business, right? Your cost allows you to do so much, right? You make your money when you buy the item. So we're going to talk about that. And the easiest one is, right, the lower you pay, the higher your potential profit, right? Especially in the reselling world, right? There's no place, I don't think, outside of selling secondary goods on the eBay market that you can buy something for like $1 and flip it for 100 or 200, maybe even more, right? Or $5 to 50. And a lot of that is because you're buying stuff at low cost because people don't see the value in the item.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, the reality is, like, if you look at big businesses, if they're buying in bulk, like the cost of goods for a place like Walmart or Target, and we kind of talked about this as far as Amazon only refunding. If you're a seller on Amazon and an item gets lost, like in transit, they will only refund the cost of the merchandise, the factory, what was the manufacturer's cost of merchandise?
Correct.
So, I remember hearing a statistic back when like Best Buy was like still big. You know, I mean, I guess it's still around. Circuit City is gone, but like Best Buy is still around. But there used to be a time when like a good portion of Best Buy's floor was CDs. Like, remember you'd walk into Best Buy and like half the store was just like CDs?
No, I do. I remember like Tower, even I can't even go more old school. Like Tower Records were the whole store with records.
Yeah, so, and I remember hearing a statistic, and I need to pull it up at some point, but back when that was the case, when CDs were still being sold at you know, Best Buy and all those places, that the average cost per CD for Best Buy was like only like 5 cents or something. Like they were getting at such ridiculously low prices. Like it was under 50 cents. It was very small amount, and so their profit margin was huge. Same thing with like if you go to the movie theaters, they don't make their money on the tickets; they make their money on concessions because the cost to make a big giant bag of popcorn, it's like 15 cents for them or something ridiculously low, and they upsell. So that is the name of a business, is buying low and selling high. But that type of profit margin just isn't accessible to the average person, right? Like if you're going to set up a brick and mortar store, you're not going to be able to buy in bulk of brand new items at a level where you can turn that kind of profit. And in reselling, especially if you're going to places like garage sales, thrift stores, you're hitting up Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, all of those things, you have that potential. Like it's one of the only ways the average everyday person can tap into that potential of having huge ROI. And so a lot of times that is one of the reasons why if you watch all the videos where we're going to garage sales and we're doing negotiations, we're willing to really negotiate. I mean, a lot of people, you know, they hear a good deal. Hey, I can sell this for $20. I'm buying it for 10. That's still a good deal. I'm going to make 10. But they're not necessarily factoring in all the other costs that are involved in selling. And maybe they still make a profit, or, oh, I could sell this for 50, so I'm buying it for 10. But every dollar you can save, like if instead of paying $10 for that item, you can negotiate it down to 5, or bulk buy items so that you can get that cost of good for everything down to a much lower number, you're going to make more profit. And so this does need to be at the forefront of your mind when you're thinking of buying, is you got to buy low, sell high. I mean, that's just the golden rule of business.
And I want to add a little bit to this because there's kind of like this pushback, like, and it's not really in the reseller space, but it's in the mainstream space, right? Where like, man, I can't believe you paid $2 and you upcharged whatever for $10, $20, $30. But I also want people to understand, like, hey, it's not what you price something at is not based on the cost. right? Just because you got something for $1, you shouldn't feel this inclination to go, you know what, I'm going to sell it for $3, right? Because if the value is there and it's worth $100, sell it for $100. And the reason being is because of the convenience that you bring, right? I want people to think about that. What reminded me of this is scrolling through social media, and I saw somebody, I think it was satire, I don't think it was real, and it was like, oh, these resellers are terrible. Like, I was watching this guy at the gas station, and the owner, he goes to Costco and he buys a bunch of snacks at Costco. And then he goes to his gas station and he sells them for twice the price of what their cost at Costco. And it's like, oh, that's just terrible. I mean, but it's true that it's a convenience store, and it's convenient for people when they go get gas. They can just go inside when they're paying for the gas to get the chips. It's like, well, there it is. Like, that
and they don't have to buy 40 of them. You know, they're only buying one.
You don't have to buy 40. You don't have to drive whatever the distance is to Costco. It's instant gratification. The chips are there. And that's what the value brings, right? In the sense that, like, just in reselling, right? You may go out there and you may find something for $1 or $2, but that wasn't your only cost, right? You had the time that you spent buying that item. You had the time that you spent researching, listing that item, packing that item, shipping that item. All those goes in play. And not only that, you may be one of a handful of people that have that item. And so therefore, if there's great demand, that means your price should go up. So don't feel guilty about, go ahead.
I was going to say, and I want to just imagine, because again, a lot of the pushback we get, and I would say sometimes you haggle a little harder than I would on things, but you know, the pushback you get at from people who see the way, you know, we go to garage sales and are willing to negotiate. Can you imagine if you just said, you know what, you're right. I do know that this item is a $40 item and they're only selling it for $1 at the garage sale. So it is now my responsibility to look at every item at this garage sale and actually tell this person what this item is worth on eBay. Can you imagine? They would kick you out of the garage sale so fast. If you're like, did you know you could sell this for this? This is actually over. And you went through every item at every garage sale you went to. Like, that's obnoxious, you know? So nobody would do that. Nobody would go through every item somebody has. You would actually want to get paid for that, because now I'm inventorying your inventory and going through and appraising it. So yeah, that's kind of funny to think about. What's the alternative? You know, if I don't tell them what it's worth, like, am I expected to do that for every item? And that kind of leads to like the flip side of this coin, which is when you overpay for an item, if you pay more than an item is not necessarily worth, but more than you could have paid for it. If you could have picked up, I'll never forget
one of the research.
Right. Yeah. So one of the first times I went to a garage sale, I didn't even understand like negotiating yet. And so I saw some books. I knew I'd be able to sell them. Like, hey, these books sell for like $80. So I threw out a number. I'm like, would you take 15 for all these? And there were a bunch of like almost like encyclopedia books. And they're like, sure. And I didn't ask them what they would take. And now that I've been going to garage sales long enough, I know I probably could have picked up that set for $5. Right. So I paid an extra $10 than I needed to. Well, what that does is that limits my ability now to do things like run a sale. Right. Like it's really important to do things like run sales. It limits my ability to take an offer. It limits my ability to, you know, have some play and wiggle room. And it makes it harder to sell, because now I kind of have to sell it at a higher price in order to make that time worth it. Whereas if I had picked it up for $5, yeah, sure, I'll take 40, 45 instead of, nope, I've got to wait for that buyer coming in at 75 or 80. Otherwise, it's not going to be worth it for all the time and effort I've had to put into this. So you have more flexibility and freedom when you can purchase things at a lower price.
Yeah, no, it's huge. And here's the thing. If let's say you bought it at a higher price and it kind of, you know, depleted your capital, right? It puts you in a really tough bind, because you're like, hey, I need to sell it at a higher price, right, in order to make my money back, in order to be profitable. But your item could be sitting on eBay forever, right? Forever. But if you buy it super low, right, and, you know, the day comes and somebody finally sends you an offer, you can be like, yeah, you know what? It's out of here. I'm going to make good profit. It's time to move it on. But if you pay high, like, you do feel that obligation to list it high. I mean, I have a lot of items like that where I kind of, you know, I spent like maybe $50 on something, and you know, had I just paid like $20, maybe it would have changed things. But now I'm like, oh, I need to not only clear, you know, the price, but I need to make sure that the fees and the shipping and all that don't come out of that. So here's the other components to think about too, that paying less allows you a lot of flexibility in what you do on eBay. And, you know, here's the thing. People that shop on eBay, I would say, at least in the secondary market, most people are looking for a deal, right? Yes. Will they be willing to pay, a few $1,000s for that pair of Jordans or that collectible baseball card and so on? Yes. But even still, they know that when they go to eBay, they are generally going to get a better deal if they go to an auction house or they get it from a private seller, right? It's a better option. So what that allows you to do is to run sales, right? And even if you run sales and somebody sends you an offer lower than your sale, you can still accept that and still make good profit. But if you're buying at, I would say even margins that are, you're making, I don't know, 10 or 20% on an item, like that can get pretty tough. Like it's very hard to negotiate on a price. It's very hard to accept an offer, very hard to run sales. And coupons, you can send all kinds of coupons. Like if you buy low, you can definitely send a lot of coupons. And this is why I would say in the last 4 or 5 years, as eBay has changed, as reselling has changed, people that buy from the bins or people that are buying huge bulk or buying from Amazon pallets, like those people have been able to get stuff from pennies on the dollar. And the reason they're able to be successful is like the one person that ends up going to, like, let's say the higher end thrift store and paying, $30 for a jacket, or the person that finds a jacket at the bin for $1, like they're able to negotiate that price, right? To them, it's a win throughout. And so you want to make sure that you set yourself up for success by paying really low. So then you can take an offer if you need to, you can run a sale, and you can run a coupon.
Yeah, that's good. So another thing here is, I'll never forget this. So we all know Lululemon. Like Lululemon is fantastic. If you can get your hands on Lululemon inventory, it sells. LuLaRoe, and I did a whole episode, like a whole, separate Saturday episode several years ago, where we went through that documentary of LuLaRoe. Oh, yeah. LuLaRoe, not so much, right? Like, don't get the Lulus mixed up. So LuLaRoe is not going to be your hot seller. However, I went to a garage sale, and I can't tell you how many times I go to garage sales, and it's somebody who was in one of those pyramid scheme companies like LuLaRoe, and they have tons of inventory and they're trying to offload it, but they're trying to offload it at like their cost of goods. They're like, well, I paid like $3 or $4 or $5 per item. So yeah, sure, I'll sell all 200 items, but I'm going to need like $5 an item. So that's going to be $1,000. And I'm just like, okay, good luck. And then I leave. Like there's just we're not going to make profit there. But I did go to one where I picked up a huge amount of LuLaRoe items for like pennies. It was, I think I paid 50 cents per item. And so what that allowed me to do, and at that time I was selling a lot on Poshmark, because the cost of goods was so low, even though I had never sold LuLaRoe before, I knew it was kind of a risky thing. And the total cost, like price I could sell most of these items for was like $8 to $9 tops. I would never pick these up normally, but I was able to take that risk because the price was so low. And so one of the things that buying low allows you to do is take huge risks when it comes to, and when I say huge risk, it's really not a big risk, but take bigger risks than you otherwise would, right? I wouldn't drop $50 on an item I wasn't 100% sure about and I thought I was going to lose my money. But if I could drop $50 on 30 different items that maybe I'm a little bit unsure about some of them, but I'm going to make, and it's a learning experience. Or I think about your experience with buying lots of Hot Wheel cars, right? You didn't know anything about the Hot Wheel community very much. Like maybe you knew a couple of bolos here and there. But by doing that, by being able to purchase a ton of Hot Wheels at a very low price, you could take that risk of, you know what, I might be making some bad buys here, but it was a learning experience and you ended up making a ton of profit off of it. And now you've got knowledge that you're going to be able to make money on Hot Wheels for years and years and years to come because you've learned that. And so don't be afraid when you're at garage sales and thrift stores, even if it's something you're not necessarily familiar with. If you can get in bulk, or if you can get lots of different items, like if you could do a whole clear out, even like, hey, I'm going to buy the rest of this garage sale inventory and I've got the space for it and I'm only spending $20 and I might end up throwing half of it away and donating another 10%, but I'm going to learn a few things and I'm going to actually be able to turn a profit on quite a bit of it. That is a risk you are more willing to take because we say it's a risk, but in a lot of ways it's less, because if you're only risking $20, $50, $100 as opposed to hundreds or thousands of dollars, it's well worth it. And that's something that buying low kind of opens up the opportunity to.
Yeah, and one of the Hot Wheels is a good example, but Hot Wheels was kind of like the easier one, but still it was a risk, right? But when I bought those duck decoys, right, and those lanterns, and the crazy thing about duck decoys, like unless there's a signature, unless there's something there that you're able to easily look up, like it's a huge risk with duck decoys. Now, as a result of my huge purchase, in case you guys are wondering, like I think it was 2 summers ago, I spent $500 and I bought, I don't know, like 50 duck decoys. I still think I have like 10 of them I haven't listed yet. But I bought a ton of them, and the reason I bought them, I was like, man, I could end up with these duck decoys for years, right? If I made a bad buy. But if it's $500, like my capital is not really that tied up. And sure enough, overnight I made the $500 back because there were some lanterns that I thought had no value. By the way, there's these old vintage railroad lanterns that I thought were maybe worth $30. The people that gave them to me thought they were worthless too. Lo and behold, I end up finding out that it's worth like $2,000, and I end up selling for $500. But the reality is that I also paid, right, for my education, right, and I won in the end, right. In the end, I ended up making, I think, about $4,300 on everything that I sold from that $500 purchase. But it was risky. I had zero knowledge on duck decoys or railroad lanterns, and I could tell stories upon stories about this. And I'm sure many of you that are listening could share how you were like, you know what, the cost is low enough. I'm willing to risk this. I'm willing to spend $2-3. And it ended up working out for you. So make sure that you end up, taking the time to get that cost low. If it's something like, I think it's profitable, but I don't know. Yeah, don't put yourself in that bad scenario. Get that low price.
Yeah, let us know in the comments. If you're watching on YouTube, write in the comments, let us know what was maybe a niche you got into or a risk you took because the price was low, and did it pay off? Like, they don't always pay off, right? Like you could end up spending a couple $100 on something, and then you get home and you're going through your inventory, and it was a learning experience, right? You paid for an education. Yeah. But why were you willing to take that risk? Did price play a role in your in the purchasing price play a role in your decision to take that risk? Let us know. I'm sure we've got some amazing stories. Thinking of on our Discord, we've got people, going back to Tim the Slim, buying out a bunch of dolls. Like you never know what you could end up with. So what were some crazy risks that you took? Let us know in the comments below. Share that story.
Hey, and before we move on, part of keeping those costs low is ensuring that what you're doing is profitable, right? You're going and you're spending, low money on items. You're selling them for well, but you need to track that somehow. And one of the best ways to do that is with My Reseller Genie. So My Reseller Genie is bookkeeping software for resellers, made by resellers for resellers. And here's what I love. They are continually improving what they're doing, right? It's not like they created like one static website with just, some items on there, and they're just, making money, but they're not doing anything about it. So for example, one of the latest feature alerts is they have a Schedule C generator, which is really nice on there, especially when it comes around to tax time. So if you have not yet checked out My Reseller Genie, use our code Pure Hustle. You'll get 15% off the first month, and it's going to allow you to be able to use that bookkeeping for your taxes that are coming up here in April, coming soon. It's going to allow you to even track, your profit and loss, your inventory over time. Definitely check them out. My Reseller Genie, 15% off the first month.
Yeah, and this is the time, right? This is the time for tax. You should be, for two reasons. One, you've got to be dealing with your taxes now. So if you've been using My Reseller Genie, but if you're like, man, I wish I would have used that while I'm going through all my tax paperwork now, trying to figure things out, now's the time to start. Like if you're not already using My Reseller Genie, sign up now, use that promo code, because you want to go into the end of 2025 filling your 2025 taxes and it being a breeze, right? You already have all of your profits and loss and costs of good and all of that taken care of, all of your write-offs. So get My Reseller Genie now. You don't want to wait until like June, July, August to start, because then you've got way more work to do. So get started now.
No, agreed. All right, now here's the thing. If you pay too much, right? Even the items that you can sell for a lot, and this kind of goes with our previous points, even the items that you sell for a lot, it's not like, yes, I'm so glad. But it depends on your business. So today I was talking about watches with one of my friends. One of the latest things I I've started dabbling in is collecting watches. And he said, hey, you should only do that if you're selling Rolexes. And I was like, oh, Rolexes? Like, no, I won't get into it. There's multiple reasons. One of the reasons is it's you have to know a lot to sell those kind of watches. You have to be able to spot what's fake. You have to know, what are the right dials, what's, all these different things to look at. But one of the things is on that is if you ever watch them on social media, like their profit margins are low. Like they'll buy a watch for like $30K and they'll sell it for $31.5 or $32, right? And it's like, whew, like that's a good payday if you know what you're doing. But if you don't know what you're doing, that's a terrible payday. But when it comes to us, those of you that are listening to us, right, it's a different audience. I don't think we have a lot of Rolex resellers here listening to the podcast. If you buy items, right, really expensive items, you're like, hey, I'm going to drop $500, but I'm going to, try to sell this for $700. Like that's pretty rough, right? And so you're not going to make a lot of profit, right? And I will say there is a happy median. Like I think about Matt Klein, who sells shoes. Like he goes to Nike outlets, he goes all over the place, and he buys brand new shoes. So his cost of goods a little higher, right? He's paying $40, $50, $60, and maybe he's selling them for $100, $150. But still he's not paying too much for an item that he's at risk of his business shutting down at any moment, right? He has the ability to continue keeping those profit margins. So be aware of that. And when we say low cost, that could apply to garage sales, or that could apply to the retail arbitrage side, right? Where you're buying items and maybe the cut's a little different. Like, for example, on Amazon, and you're kind of worried, hey, one way to ensure that your business is viable, that things are going well, is to keep your costs low.
Yeah, no, that's great. Are we ready to jump into our
is it
hustles
already
of
that
the week
time?
now? Yeah,
we're flying. This time has flown by. Okay, yeah, let's do it. Sorry, I feel like I thought we had, like, I didn't even look at the clock. I thought we had like a whole another like 50 minutes, but no, it's already been halfway through the show. So yeah, let's do those hustles of the week.
All right, so let me get that music queued up. Come on, hustlers. It's the freaking hustle of the week. All right, so our first hustle of the week comes from Matt. It was a Gmail. He says, hi, y'all. Must be a Texan. I appreciate that. Maybe not, but I like the y'all. The y'all's growing on me. I'm using it more and more. So it says, thanks for everything that you do. My wife and I are in my first year of reselling and have been seeing some great success across the board. The list 5 items a day goal that you hammered home skyrocketed our sales in Q3 last year, and we've been riding the wave ever since. I love that. I was listening to the latest episode, and the conversation of talking to coworkers and friends about reselling popped up. While there is a stigma around it that you talked about, there is great value to be had in just wanting to add to the conversation with my hustle of the week and biggest sale to date. So my wife's coworker gave her a bunch of stuff from the house that she just wanted gone. So in return, my wife took her out to lunch, and she was more than happy with the exchange. Among the mostly electronic component stereo equipment was an old Coca-Cola advertisement that was in a wooden frame. I'm aware that Coca-Cola stuff is pretty saturated market on eBay, but something told me to look further into this specific one. I found out it was a rare wartime lithograph from the 40s. I was led to an auction house and the rare sold comps of the item, but whenever they were in a good condition, they fetched a hefty premium. I ended up listing the framed poster for $1,400 plus shipping back in the summertime and stuffed it away in my closet. I sent out some offers for $1,100 and a buyer countered at $1,000, and we accepted. So we sold an original vintage World War II 1943 Have a Coke advertisement. That's so cool. We had a net of just over $750 when all was said and done. It just goes to show that there is extreme value in making your hustle known. Thanks again for all you do for the community, Matt. Man, that is fantastic. I love that. I love that you, one, got a piece of history. Two, that it was, that idea of connecting, right? Sharing with people that you're a reseller. You are going to have so many people willing to either give you items or try and sell you items or help you make a connection. Oh, I've got a friend, they're going to have a garage sale, or they're planning on getting rid of this. So just by letting people know, you can make those great connections with people. And like you said, she wanted that stuff gone. She got lunch out of the deal, your wife's coworker, and everybody ends up happy in the end. Man, what an awesome, from basically free to $1,000. Unbelievable.
And all it took was getting a little awkward, right? That's the thing.
Yeah.
Like it is a little bit awkward saying, hey, by the way, and this is probably the beginning, right? There's going to be a lot of opportunities out there. Again, if you ever want to scale your reselling, make sure you communicate to people that you are a reseller. All right. So our next hustle of the week here comes from B Games from the podcast. Now, hopefully I get this right, because I know, well, not from the podcast, from the Discord that runs as a result of the podcast. So I apologize, B Games. I don't know what happened. He had mentioned in Discord that he shared a hustle of the week and that I didn't share it, or that I shared the wrong information. I'm not sure what happened. Things are getting confusing now that we're episode 433. This happened sometime in the 300s, possibly, maybe in the early 400s. But B Games from the Discord said, my hustle of the week, back in October, I came across a whole bunch of auctions for new sealed iPad cases and some random Lithograph brand electronics like audio receiver transmitters and Bluetooth cassette receivers for if you have an old car with no auxiliary cord. I was potentially losing my job at the end of the year, and this was going to be the most I've ever spent on inventory at one time. Wow, that's when the deals come, though. Like when it's you're at the end here, and so was almost about to lose the job. Was trying to figure things out, and so the numbers made sense on this purchase. Took the risk and went all in. Purchased 9 of the lots for a total of $9,885.66. It's so funny because we're talking about keeping costs low. I'm pretty sure that's what happened here, because that's a big purchase. Okay, not including the U-Haul that he used, the shipping costs, about $400 for the U-Haul though. All right, so he made several trips, okay, on this U-Haul, and if you ever want to catch on the Discord, you can take a look, and we'll share about this in a moment. And so ended up driving a total of 8 hours and probably about 20 hours max time spent prepping the inventory to send to Amazon. Now Q4 is over, and as of today, I've made back $16,038.17 after Amazon fees for a total profit of about $6,000. And I still have about $5,000 after fees of products still selling, which will bring me to at least a 2x ROI even after refunds. That's an important number. As reselling, we commonly flip $1 to $100, which we've talked about today. But hitting a 2x on $10K spent is just as incredible, I 100% agree, as a 100x on $1 spent, in my opinion. Being willing to pay up a bit when buying a lot of stuff has proven crucial to me for scaling my business. Investing in reselling also beats the stock market sellers and typically businesses buying them. Pick it up, dirt cheap, easy money. Yeah, so even though, right, the cost was there, it was at a low cost where the numbers, like he said, made sense, right? He's going to be really profitable. And yes, going from 10,000 to almost 9,000 to almost 20,000, like those are some great numbers, right? You kept your costs low, and even though there's refunds coming in during Q4, you're still going to end up profitable. So hey, nice work there. And
in some ways, really it also kind of shows the flip side, right? Like we're talking about, like keeping the cost of goods low is obviously essential, but there are times when you can break the rules, right? And so being able to only maybe make a 10 or 20% profit on items might be worth it if it's really, really high value items, right? Like you kind of mentioned, like the Rolex thing. Like if you know what you're doing and it's like, I might be spending $10,000 for this, but I'm going to be able to sell it for $15,000, a $5,000 profit, even though it's only 50%. It's not 10xing your money. One sale, one listing, or in a sense like this, if you can buy in bulk. So it's not always just of, hey, I need to be able to get everything so that I can make 100 times profit on it. And that's not always the goal, right? That is a great goal if you can, but there are going to be times when paying up for items is worth it, and when buying in bulk is also going to be huge for making money like that. All right. So our next one comes from @flipformore on Instagram. So it says, picked up a vintage mouse at the thrift store for $18. Man, can you imagine paying $18 for a mouse at a thrift store? It's got to be a good one. So it was a contour design roller mouse. Ooh, roller mouses can be really good. So it was wired mouse. It was ergonomic. Now this is key. When you find like the right ergonomic stuff, man, there is a huge market for that. So it was listed on eBay and sold for $139.99 plus shipping. See, now that makes $18 worth it, right? Like it's a lot of times when you're expecting, like I'm buying a used mouse at a garage sale or a thrift store, you're only going to be paying less than $1 for, about $1 for. But it's totally worth paying 18, even though it kind of seems like paying up for a single item when you know that item has a track record of selling for $139. So that cost of good is actually low for that item. It's anything ergonomic, especially if it's, and I like the idea that it's vintage, because especially when it comes to office stuff, people know what they like. Like if somebody is working in an office and they've been in an office for 20 years and they've got carpal tunnel syndrome, but they found like a keyboard that works and they don't want to go on Amazon and buy a whole bunch of brand new ones that are ergonomic, but they're not sure if it's going to work, or same thing with a mouse. And so you get the one that they know they're going to be willing to spend money on it, because it's like, hey, I don't have wrist pain when I use this mouse. Mine broke. I'm rebuying it on eBay. That's their option.
Yeah, no, and again, I've been saying this for a long time. I think the values are only going up on these things. Like I remember back in this last summer, I picked up a bunch of keyboards, a bunch of old mouses, and I remember this was the estate sale where I didn't do my due diligence and went through the box, and they went through it and they gave me, they said $150, but no, they said 200, and I negotiated for 150. But then when I went home and went through the box, the cost based on the labels of the estate sale was 120. So I actually negotiated a higher price had I just done my due diligence. But guess what? All the mouses, all the keyboards, I ended up making about $500, right? And they were old. Like some of these mouses, like, they had that like yellow tinge to it because they're old, right? People still wanted them, right? So keep an eye out for old tech. And by the way, Flip for More, long-time listener of the show. I don't know how many hustles a week we've had from Flip for More. So check him out on Instagram. If you're not following, you're missing out on good stuff, because he always ends up finding like the non-YouTube stuff, right? Because you go on YouTube, it's always like, you still hear about Patagonia and there's some new brands, but he's picking up other things that people aren't seeing. And so it's definitely worth taking a look. All right, Mike. Before we go hustle of the week, hey, I want to invite everybody to follow us on social media. We are Pure Hustle Cast on X, and we are Pure Hustle Podcast on all other platforms. Always feel free to give us an email, Gmail at purehustlepodcast@gmail.com. I was going to say give us a call. So hold off on the call. I got to resolve that because I think our phone number expired. We haven't updated it, so we need to take care of that. So make sure to communicate to us via Gmail, purehustlepodcast@gmail.com. Grateful for all of you that listen to us. If you have not yet subscribed to our YouTube, jump on over to our YouTube right now. Hit that subscribe button, smash that like button, and hit that bell notification. And as always, grateful for all of you that leave us iTunes reviews, even the ones that sometimes there's like, Orlando's the worst, and Mike's even gotten those too. The reality is, like, all of it helps our algorithm, but we really do appreciate the 5 stars and the reviews of why you listen. So if you haven't yet, make sure to do that. And last of all, you've heard us talk about the Discord. If you want to be part of our Discord, the way to do it is go on patreon.com/purehustlepodcast or go to the link below. For $5.55 a month, you will become part of our Patreon members, and that gives you access to our Discord filled with all kinds of different resellers, from retail arbitrage to vintage clothing to you name it, with a bunch of knowledge. Making back that $5.55, you're going to make that so many times over if you just follow some of the knowledge that is in our Discord on day one. So check us out, $5.55 a month, patreon.com/purehustlepodcast. All right, what is your hustle of the week, Mike?
Before I get my hustle of the week, we might have some of our listeners who are feeling the same as I was feeling. So I looked it up just to verify. So you were saying mouses for the plural for a computer computer mouse.
Mice.
Well, now, so that's what my gut feeling is. It's got to be mice, but I'm like, maybe not, since it's a computer mouse. Maybe it's different. So I did look it up, and technically both are acceptable, but mice is the most accepted or the most common. But mouses is not wrong according to the dictionary, as the internet tells me. So, so if anybody's going to leave
internet,
it, yeah,
you didn't go to AI. You didn't ask Grok?
Well, AI is part of that as well. So, but yeah, so if anybody's going to leave the comment saying, I can't believe Orlando's saying mouses, because we get those comments too. I mean, man, don't put an extra word accidentally typo in your title, because we'll get called out, right? We're being educators. We cannot make mistakes. But all right, so my hustle of the week comes from an old pickup. So I had picked up a lot of Department 56 stuff at a garage sale years ago. It was one of my best hauls to date. And I sold through most of it. So I'm not like a Department 56 expert, but there's different lines of Department 56. And some of the lines are definitely more valuable than others. And so I had sold through pretty much all of the really profitable pieces, including a lot of the the trees. Like I had trees and various things. So I have a tote left full of kind of the leftovers, the things that have been listed for years. I've kind of dropped the prices on some of them. But one of them sold. It wasn't even an offer. It was just like full asking price. So I made like $40 on it. And I've already made so much money on my Department 56 stuff that I've been looking at this tote full of the leftovers thinking like, should I just lot all this together at like a really cheap price? But seeing that a sale's still coming in just goes to show that, holding on to stuff forever is not the ideal selling strategy. But when you do get those sales of an item that's been sitting for a while, even though $40 isn't a huge amount of profit, because I've already made a killing off of all of that stuff, that was basically free. It's almost just trash at this point. So selling that item was kind of just like, yes, one more Department 56 item gone. And to be honest, they're relatively easy to ship. I mean, I still semi-float the box, but because they're in the styrofoam cases already, if they were not broken when you bought it, a little bit of packaging, it makes shipping not too bad. What about you, Orlando?
So I had mentioned this hustle of the week a little bit, but the story continues. So I had mentioned how I went to somebody's house and I bought a bunch of jerseys and some Skechers shoes, and I paid about $150 because I didn't know. Like, I didn't know what I had, kind of what we're talking about in this podcast today, right? And it ended up being profitable, right? And I had another evidence of that. And this is something I should have mentioned, and I'm mentioning it now because, some things sell better based on events, right? So these football jerseys, if I ended up picking up a bunch of jerseys of a team that's on its way to the Super Bowl, guess what? I'm going to be able to sell these for good money. And here's a tip. Sell them before the event. Don't try to sell them after. Generally, people are all hyped on the way, and if the team loses, you're not going to be able to sell that. So make sure when it's hot. So, I paid $150. I already sold multiple jerseys. I've already made close to $500. And then somebody said, hey, I really want this jersey to Chicago by Thursday. And this was Sunday. And usually when I get those, like priority, you got to be careful. Like priority is sketchy. Like it used to be automatic 3 days, but I've had priority take like 5 or 6 days. Ground Advantage, I got some things that like show up a week later. It's crazy. It's changed ever since First Class Mail. And so you got to hop on those things when people are willing to pay a premium, because the jersey, I don't, it is worth what they paid, but I don't know if I would have had the sale had I not responded right away, had I not said, hey, by the way, no problem, I can get it to you. So what I did is I said, no problem, I can get it to you by Thursday. There's 2 options. I can ship it first thing Monday morning, priority, and chances that'll get there by Thursday are highly likely, but not guaranteed. But you can, pay another $20 or $30 via Venmo or PayPal for the shipping, and I can send it, overnight or 2-day and make sure that it gets there for you on time. And they're like, you know what? No worries. Let's just do it on Monday with priority. And I ended up paying, I don't know, if you averaged out, maybe like $5 for this jersey, and it ended up selling. This was a vintage Mitchell and Ness, Derek Thomas, Kansas City Chiefs throwback jersey. And it sold for $135 plus ship. So nice. Not bad. Yeah. And again, you got to think about it. Like if you're going to sell something for over $100 and people are messaging, you might be at lunch. I mean, I was at lunch with my boys, our typical Sunday meal after church. And I was sitting there. I was like, oh, I don't want to take this, but this is $100. Like, I'll respond right away and do that, because what's happening is I guarantee they had sent offers or had emailed, not emailed, message other eBay sellers selling the same one. And whoever was able to say, I can make this happen, is the one that would end up getting the sale. So make sure you are prompt on those responses. So, hey, thank you, everyone, for sending in your hustles of the week. All right, let's delve a little bit more into why you should.
So I took some liberties here, and I added a couple more. I was kind of looking at our at the other ones we were going to talk about, and a lot of our talking points. I mean, I don't want it to sound like we're beating a dead horse, right? And some of these they kind of feel repetitive because when we're giving our stories, we're touching on a lot of things. So I wanted to kind of add a couple of extra things to consider here. And one of the things is there's this psychological trap when you have a high cost of good. When you're at a garage sale or thrift store, even if you know something is going to be profitable, when you pay up for it, it kind of creates this like attachment bias. Like you've now got in your mind, like I've paid a lot of money for this item, and can't let it go for less, or you kind of feel like a little bit more of an attachment. If you pay $1 for something, unless it's like the greatest thing in the world, you almost have no attachment to it. But the moment you start to spend more money, the more you spend on something, the more you're connected to it. And so you're going to have a harder time letting it go. And that's more of a psychological thing, even than a business thing. So one of the things is to kind of detach yourself from the items you're buying. But you want to make sure that you recognize if you're going to pay up for something, you're going to have that natural inclination to not want to let it go for a lower price. And even if it makes sense, I'll give you an example. So I bought some board games. I bought 2 of them sealed. They were good board games. And I paid like $75 each for them, knowing that like, hey, there are times these sell for like $150. So I'm still going to be able to double my money on this. Well, since then, the market has gone down a little bit, and I could still sell these items for $100, $110, but because I paid $75 for them, I'm like, maybe if I wait a little bit, that item's going to go up, and it's sitting there, and it's really almost a worse drain on my business, because now I've got $150. I got 2 of these items. I paid up a little bit for them, even though I knew my profit wasn't going to be, an insane amount, but it was still going to double my money. But now that I've paid up for those items, I have a more attachment to those board games, and I'm less willing to let them go, even if it makes sense financially. Even if it's like, hey, I'm only going to clear $10 on this, but it's more than just clearing $10. It's I get my $75 back, and now I have that money that I can go buy other things. So you got to be careful when you're buying something that when you pay up for something, especially when you start to get into like maybe higher end items and you're paying $1,000 for a couple of things, and you're really more likely to develop that attachment to it. Like think of your Funko Pop. Right, you got Funko Freddy sitting in there. How much did you spend on Funko?
I spent $1,000.
All right, and I think part of that, other than it's really cool, is just the fact that you're like, I feel like you got a little bit more connection to it because of the amount you spent on it.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I agree. If I had spent like $50 or maybe even 100 or 200, I would have flipped it already. But the fact that I invested, quote unquote, in it, I still keep it. And it's still here in the corner of the podcast room chilling in the same box with the same protection around it to make sure it doesn't get damaged. But to be fair, at my new residence, I'm probably going to get like a plastic, like an acrylic case for it and display it. So
now that's ultimate attachment right there. When you go from, I bought this to sell, to I am now going to display this proudly as a centerpiece of my house.
I feel so exposed.
That's attachment.
It is attachment. You're so right. Well, it is what it is. All right. Hey, okay, moving forward from that. Hey, here's the thing. Sell on eBay, you got to stay competitive, right? And if your costs aren't low, you may be pricing yourself out of business. And the thing is, the people that are constantly winning are the people that keep their prices low. And I've mentioned this before, like the bin sellers or the people that buy in bulk. Like, that's just something you have to do. And, markets change, right? So if you didn't buy low, you bought like at a premium, and the market changed on an item, and the value of that item drops by 50%, and you paid up, like you will be at a loss, right? But if you paid low, like regardless where the market goes, now hopefully you picked up something that had a good sell-through rate and you sold it in time that the market didn't change too much over the time. But sometimes markets do shift pretty quick. Like there may be something that's hot on TikTok that everybody wants, and you have that item, right? And you're able to, move it quick. And even when it collapses, like it may be only hot for like 3 days, and it'll still sell after. But if you don't have your costs low enough, like you will be at a loss. So you need to be aware of that. Like that is super key, super important.
Yeah, that's good. The next one here, we've kind of already been alluding to the idea that the cost of good isn't just the price you pay when you buy the item, but there's some hidden costs in that cost of good that we're looking at, right? When you drive 20 miles to a garage sale, when you've got your time to, do the research to figure all of that out, then you've got to list that item, you've got to ship that item, you've got the fees that come along with it. So even though we kind of think of those things as compartmentalized, that's all an aspect of cost of goods. And so if you're a good reseller, you're thinking about all of those extra fees when you're buying that item. So when you're buying an item for $10, knowing I can sell it for 20, if that's the only item you're picking up at that garage sale, you still might need to do it because, hey, I didn't want to waste my time completely. But by the time you factor in gas, by the time you factor in the time to list, by the time you factor in the fees, I'm not just making from 10 to 20 on this. I might only be making $3 or $4. And so you want to include all of that in your initial calculations when you're considering cost of goods. It's not just that one aspect of how much cash did I pull out of my wallet and hand to this person, but what were all those hidden fees and hidden expenses along the way, and those hidden expenses that you're going to have to pay on the back end when you're dealing with eBay and taxes and all of that. So make sure you're considering that as well, and which makes any of those variables that you can affect. All right, sometimes it's hard to affect how far you have to travel. So it's impossible to really impact the amount of fees you're going to have to pay because those are set by eBay. Pretty much the only variable there you have control over is how much money you're pulling out of your wallet. And so that's one of the reasons we're kind of harping on that today is that is the aspect you want to try and control when you can, but you also have to consider all of those other costs as well.
Yeah, it's I think all the time, like, I think of these hockey sticks that I've been selling. They've been selling, but it's, I paid $60 and I ended up getting like 10 hockey sticks, 4 or 5 pairs of like roller blades, a bunch of other equipment, and I made back the money instantly. I sold one of the hockey gloves and I sold some pucks, and I did well. But I had a whole scenario where this last time I ended up selling a hockey stick for $100, and I ended up shipping it out to Canada, and I couldn't ship it through the eBay International Shipping Program because I don't know if anyone's aware, but there's like limitations on the size of items that you could send via eBay International Shipping. So eBay is like, hey, go and use pirate ship. I can use pirate ship. And I shipped it, and guess what? It showed up broken. And I was like, oh, right. And so luckily, I did it through pirate ship, and pirate ship through UPS has up to $100. Plus, I didn't know this. This is brand new. I feel so stupid that I didn't know this. Did you know when it comes to insurance that if you sell stuff via the post office and you do an insurance claim, I knew this part, like they will only pay you back if they approve your claim. They will only pay you back the item that you sold, but they will not pay you back the shipping. But if you do it via UPS, they will pay you back the item and the shipping. Right? So just something to consider. I had no idea about this until this happened. But the bigger story about it was, hey, my cost was so low that in the end, yeah, did it hurt to have to refund $100 and refund the $65? It did. But even if I lost, that item is lost, right? I'm never going to get that hockey stick back. I don't want them to ship it back because it's going to cost me $65 as they ship it back. But guess what? In the end, I didn't see that. You talked about hidden costs. I didn't see that cost, right? I didn't see the fact that, hey, if I actually ended up paying, like, let's say $50 or $60 and this item broke and I had to refund them, man, like all the money I'd be out. But in the end, I lost, $2 or $3. Luckily, with the insurance claim, I'm actually going to be okay because it's going to still be profitable because I'll get the $100 back and I'll get the $65 back. So definitely another reason to keep your costs low.
Nice. This next one for me is really, again, kind of almost like a psychological aspect of reselling and cost. Is what feels better, Orlando, than going to a garage sale, seeing maybe a grail item or an item that you're like super excited to pick up? Maybe you've sold one before. Imagine you walked into a garage sale and then you see that, one of those railroad lanterns that you've already sold for hundreds of dollars. And you're like, I know that model. I know I'm going to be able to sell it well. And then you're able to get it at a dirt cheap price. Like maybe you paid $20 or $50 for the last one, but this one you were able to get it for half the price you got the first one, right? Like that feeling right there, it's almost hard to put a price tag on. Like, yeah, you've got the profit value, but that excitement, that like your heart's beating, you're at the garage sale, you're about to ask, how much do you want for this? And then they give you a low price and you're able to negotiate a little bit. That right there is almost worth its weight in gold. Just the excitement, that hustler mindset that we have of finding an item that's really awesome, finding an item that is just, it's something we've been looking for, something we know we're going to be able to sell for a lot, and being able to pick it up for a low price, right? Like I was at like an estate sale thing, and a guy had some like CPR dummy stuff that I knew was profitable. I had to do some research in the company. And then when I asked like, hey, how much for this? And they're like, I don't know, $5. It's like, yes, right? Like that's the excitement. Now, had he have, told me, a higher price and I still could have made a profit, I would have been excited, but getting it at that low number, especially when they give that first number and it's super low, man, that excitement right there makes having a low cost of good more than just how much you're going to make, but that feeling that's why we go out and source, right? Is that feeling right there.
Yeah. Oh, I've not sourced in a while still because I'm keeping to like working through items, but yes, it does. And in the end, right, keeping your costs low allows you to be successful, but not only successful, but to have sustainable success, right? Because if you rinse, repeat over and over again, right, you may take some losses, you may have some returns, you may have some items that you bought there like, oh, this is junk. But if you keep your costs low, and this is something that you're doing consistently, whether you do it through garage sales, thrift stores, Amazon pallets, the bins, whatever way you source, if you're able to continually do this, that profit should come in and your cost of goods should be low, and you shouldn't be always like on pins and needles like, oh man, eBay, like I can't believe how bad things are. I'm gonna have to shut things down. I'm gonna go out of business, right? That's one of the things I've mentioned the last few months, and I get some flack for it, for being real about the fact that things were slow and things were messed up. But even though things were like that for a while, it was still okay because my cost of goods were low enough that even when things were slow, the profitability that I was making was still worth it, right? I was still making money, and I continued buying low, and I was able to run lean and continue picking up inventory lean. It was very helpful. So keep in mind, like that's part of what the deal is. And to me, it doesn't matter if you're selling, used clothing or if you're selling, Jordans or you're selling Rolexes. Well, Rolexes might be a little different because that market's completely different, but you get what I'm saying. Like regardless, like keeping costs low, to me, buy low, sell high is the number one commandment of reselling that we should all keep in mind. Mike, any further thoughts here?
Yeah, my last thoughts here is make it happen, right? Like we got 2025. We're in this new year now, and it's time to put some of these things in practice. And I know, I see the comments all the time. We get messages all the time where people they're embarrassed to negotiate, or maybe embarrassed isn't the right word. They're just uncomfortable with it. But don't be afraid, and don't be afraid to ask, right? Like it's not always a negotiation. Again, there are the hardcore negotiations you can do where you're just trying to haggle, and that can feel uncomfortable. And if it's not natural for you, please don't do that. But definitely put into practice some of the things we've talked about in the Never Split the Difference book that we did, and other negotiation tactics we've used. Because, again, if you can make those connections with people, maybe it's a thrift store, you're willing to work with them, you're willing to do some negotiating, you can end up with some incredible sales, and your profits are going to reflect, right? You're going to make more. Your net is going to be higher if you're willing to do a little bit of negotiating and work on getting that cost of good down. Because I think we all know that. We all know I got to buy as low as possible. What not everybody is willing to do is take those steps that's required, which sometimes is ask for a lower price or bundle some things together.
Oh, completely agree. Hey, everyone, thank you for tuning in. Really appreciate, especially those of you from day one that continue listening 433 episodes later. Thank you to all of you that are brand new and are tuning in. And as always, make sure to subscribe, hit that like button, and hit that bell notification. And as always, thankful for all of you. And with that being said, make sure to be real,
be relevant,
and be reselling.
Peace.
Hustle Podcast guides our quest, learning tricks to be the best. On eBay we make our name, reselling dreams, winning the game.